Georgia-Bama week. I think a lot of you guys have been waiting a very long time for this, and Kirby Smart talked about it. Both coaches have spoken to the media at this point in the week. Kirby spoke with reporters Monday at noon, and he talked a lot about Jalen Milroe, talked a lot about Alabama's offense. Of course, he's getting asked a lot about it, getting asked about some of these elite weapons that Alabama has, but he hit it right on the head, hit the nail on the head, whatever that term is. He was spot on talking about Alabama and one of the things that makes them so dangerous. And this is also one of the things that Georgia, in some of these huge games, has struggled to defend. So, explosive plays. He talked about Alabama's explosive plays and, defining an explosive play. I can't remember, but Kirby a couple years ago talked about this. He was like, we mark these many passing yards and these many rushing yards. That would be considered an explosive play. Both of them were under. The passing yard one was around 20 yards. The rushing one was only somewhere between 10 and 15 yards. So those were considered explosive plays, right? Now that we have that established. Well, he talks about Alabama, and he talks about how the problem that you have when you're dealing with a team like Alabama is they have explosives, right? But they're not these 10, 15, 20-yard plays. They're of the 50, 60, 70 variety. So I'm going to give you what Kirby Smart had to say. I will read that quote for you, his answer to the question about preparing for Alabama's deep ball, preparing for Jalen Milroe's legs. We'll talk about it. I want to go through, look at some of the history, right? Georgia hasn't lost a lot in the last few years, right? And in the last 3 years, it's been 1-2 games. Both have been against Alabama. But you look at other games where Georgia was in a big game against an Ohio State or an LSU or something like that. It's explosive plays, and particularly explosive plays created by NFL talent is what Georgia's biggest problem is. So, Georgia's biggest problem is dealing with really, really good football players. That's usually what it takes to beat a team like Georgia. I will read Kirby Smart's quote in just a second. Ryan Curley from Dawg Post asking you to sign up for our newsletter. You want to be signed up on a week like this where the Dogs are taking on the Tide. The Dawg Post newsletter, we're pushing that into your inbox every single day. The stories that we're putting up on dogpost.com, whether it's DMAT myself, whether it's a free story or one that's behind a paywall, either way, the newsletter's free and you should be signed up for it. It's the best way to stay up to date. Here's Kirby's quote I'm reading. You do your job. They've got explosive plays that are what you would call off-schedule explosive plays, and they've got on-schedule explosive plays. So when you have the chance at both of those, it just increases your opportunity, and their explosives are super explosive. They're not talking about the 15 to 20 variety yards, that is. They're talking about the 50, 60 to 70 variety. They've got some really good skilled players out on the perimeter that are explosive. They've got a good quarterback that defines explosive, and they've got good backs. So when you've got good football players and weapons that they have out on the perimeter, it can be explosive. Our job is to try to prevent those, not give up big plays. And a lot of that starts with how well we play around the quarterback. That's what Kirby Smart said about those explosive. You look at Alabama. First, let's first look at the SEC championship from last year. Georgia lost Alabama, right? 27-24, comeback effort there in the fourth quarter. Fell a little bit short. Georgia actually did a pretty good job of limiting explosive plays against the Tide in that game. There wasn't like this 60-yard, 70-yard play. Milroe had a 30-yard run. Obviously, that was explosive. They had a few pass plays, right? 28-yard. I think it was a little. I can't remember the exact route that Jam Miller ran, but it was up the left side of the field when he went to score. Jermaine Burton had that. I think it was like a 15-yard touchdown catch. So they had some like short explosive plays, but Georgia actually did a good job of limiting Alabama in that SEC championship in this variety. You look at Alabama's numbers from this year, they're the same as last year. They've got giant plays. Justice Haynes has an 85-yard run. Jam Miller has a 56-yard run. Jalen Milroe himself has a 40-yard run. Other guys have ran. They've got Ryan Williams with multiple long touchdowns, one of them being an 84-yard pass. So they've had the explosives this year. They didn't have it against Georgia last year. Well, Georgia still lost that game. They still did. Why? Because of those off-schedule plays. Because of the Jalen Milroe is a huge reason why Georgia lost Alabama. I think that you can get nitpicking. You could say, oh, Nick Saban did this better than Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart did this better. But on those plays where Alabama's pass pro did a good enough job and Jalen Milroe had time, what happened? Key third downs, key fourth downs. Jalen Milroe gets a first down. Jalen Milroe finds Isaiah Bond on a cross. There is no Isaiah Bond, but there are other big-time weapons like a Ryan Williams, a guy that's getting those explosive plays. True freshman, 17-year-old kid, right? Doesn't turn 18 until February. This is a guy that Georgia's going to have to deal with. An elite player almost already, pretty much. This is what Kirby had to say about wide receiver Ryan Williams. Number 2, you're going to see him on Saturday. He's in the same line with the guys they've had in the past. Super quick, talented, confident with the ball, great ball skills, great quickness. He's a track athlete that was elite as a junior. He comes out and he's already performing at a high level. I don't think that there's a lot of anxiety or nerves for him. He's not one of those guys where the moment's too big for him. He's naturally jumped right in and has made plays in every game. And they have a lot of really good players out on the perimeter. And I think Jalen does a good job of both using his skill set and all of that to get the ball. So he compares Ryan Williams to the guys that they've had in the past, right? They've had really, really good wide receivers. They've had Heisman winners. They've had Biletnikoff winners. They've had Jerry Jeudy's and Devontae Smiths and Jalen Waddles and Amari Coopers and Calvin Ridley's. Over time, the players that Georgia's had to deal with, that is one of the things that beats Georgia, when you have elite players. Well, they've got that at Alabama. It hasn't changed with Nick Saban being gone. They have the elite players, and they particularly have the elite players that it will probably take to beat a team like Georgia. So I think Kirby Smart really has hit this right on the head with them. Something that he talked about in the original quote that I read to you about those off-schedule plays. What are those off-schedule plays? And particularly about Jalen Milroe when he discusses it. Off schedule. It's not the time play. There's a pass rush that's come in. There's something that's gone on that has changed the way. Who are the most dangerous quarterbacks when things like that happen? People like Lamar Jackson, people like Josh Allen, people like Cam Newton, people like Jalen Milroe who can make things happen with their legs as well. Those off schedule plays are one of the things that hurt Georgia, right? They weren't corralling Jalen Milroe a lot in that game last year. There weren't a ton of sacks. I've got the numbers pulled up. How many sacks did Georgia have on defense? They actually sacked them 4 times. Some of these numbers are surprising when you look at them. They actually got to him 4 times. Wasn't enough because the other 2 or 3 times that they didn't get him are the times that they connected downfield for some explosive or some game-saving plays. You go and look. Let's start further back. Let's get further away from Georgia's dominance as a program. Kind of have to because Georgia doesn't lose that much. They lost a couple games in 2019, lost a couple games in 2020. They've lost a couple games since then. They've lost like 6 games since 2019. It's absolutely ridiculous. Well, look, I don't know that anyone was going to beat that 2019 LSU team. But why did they crush Georgia? Because they couldn't contain the explosive plays. They couldn't contain Joe Burrow. 71-yard pass to Justin Jefferson. They completed a 41-yard pass to Terrace Marshall. That one long pass to Justin Jefferson. I called him Juffin Jesterson. Wow. That one long pass to Jefferson is one of the biggest highlights on Joe Burrow's college highlight tape. Florida, 2020, a game that Georgia lost. Explosives, 50-yard pass, 37-yard pass, 34-yard pass to Kyle Pitts. They were able to get them downfield. Now, these aren't the only reasons why Georgia's lost these games. Alabama, SEC Championship. Georgia lost this game. Big-time explosive plays to Jamison Williams. 2 of them, if I remember correctly. A big one to John Mechie. Big run from Bryce Young, 15-yard touchdown run. Big explosive plays, Georgia got beat. A game where Georgia almost got beat, maybe should have got beat. I don't know, however you want to put it. Marvin Harrison Jr., multiple explosive plays. Xavier Johnson, do you remember that touchdown right before halftime in the Ohio State game? That was a big play where he ran past Jamal Dumas-Johnson and spun into the end zone. Mekhi Buka had an explosive play. If Alabama does what it has done all year and converts on these explosives, Georgia's going to have a really hard time on Saturday. If they can do what they did in 2023, which was limit those, Georgia has a better chance. They only lost by 3 in that game. Obviously, Georgia hasn't necessarily got blown out by Alabama. A bunch has happened, but if you limit the explosives, you have a better chance. And that's something that they got to do against an offense like this one that's led by a quarterback like Jalen Milroe. Thanks for watching.